Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where last episode we set up our Duna colony. They only found out that they're on a Duna colony literally right now, as they were just asking, when are we going to take off and head back home? And we were just like, I'm sorry, you guys are there forever now. At least until we decide to send a rescue mission, they're not going anywhere. We're going to get a lot of science out of that, and we'll want to pop back and get additional science researching now and then. But for the time being, that's all well and good. There's not really anything else to do on that front. So we need to move on to our next project. And the question is, what project is that? Well, we have a mission to do basically the same thing, but exploring Eve. So we need to make ground contact on Eve, and we need to plant a flag on Eve. The real question is, how are we going to land on land as opposed to on water? That's going to be interesting to find out. We might just have to hope. We'll see. We'll see. But I think that we can use largely the same craft that we used for Duna. That thing was a monster and wildly overkill. We can definitely ditch the communication satellites. Those are unnecessary. So if we were to grab the combined Duna lander here, we can bring this overall contraption, but we don't need anywhere near all of this. Our payload is actually going to be a lot lighter. We can probably downscale this substantially. So, we would ditch these Rockamax fuel tanks. I believe them not to be necessary here. Then we would connect these guys in like this. I'll still have it be like this. That's fine. Then everything up here, we would largely not need to have all of this, right? We would want to rework everything from here up. So as far as this actual lander goes, we're going to ditch everything here, and we're going to call this the Eve lander. Cool. And we don't actually have anything to save. I want this to be a single Kerbal ship. All we need is somebody that can get out and plant a flag, right? So I don't want to be abandoning Kerbals everywhere. So we're just going to put in like a really, really light Mark 1 command pod. And we're going to be able to downsize these boosters for sure. Absolutely on that. So we're going to put in a Mark 1 command pod here. This is going to be a very basic landing system, right? So we're going to put in a parachute on here. So this will be a Mark 16 parachute. And honestly, that plus a couple of drogues would probably do the trick. Okay. So I'm going to make this be a white capsule like so, just to match our parachutes. And we put in a couple of drogues. Something like this. Then down here we do the actual lander. But I want to include deployable science. We may as well bring that. So like an SEQ-3, we may want to mount that up here. Ooh, that didn't go the way I wanted it to. We may want to mount that up here instead, but that's only an SEQ-3. Hang on. Where's the SEQ-9? I know that there's one of those. Yeah, one of these bad boys. Okay, so we'll put in something like this, and we'll put our deployable science in that. So an ionographer is actually useless because that cannot be that cannot get science where there is atmosphere. So we'll bring it if we have space, but we've got a weather analyzer here, an experiment control station. We bring a communitron. We would bring a passive seismometer. I don't think Eve is tectonically active, but that's fine. We would need a Guab ED monitor, and then beyond that, we would probably just need power. So we would bring like 4 power stations, like so. Now, if these are being set up by an unsuited Kerbal, they're only going to produce 1 power. Each one of these requires 1 power. Can we bring another photovoltaic panel here? Actually, yes, we can. Perfect. So that would give us the 5 power that we would need, even if they're being set up by an unsuited Kerbal. I love it. From there, we would put in a TD... Where are we? TD12 decoupler. Here we go. A TD12 decoupler. And then we'd put in a ridiculous heat shield. Boom. But we would need this to be able to be, you know, landed, right? So we would need landing legs on here. I'd want to have some amount of power generation. Does this have a reaction wheel? I believe it does. It does. So we would need to have some amount of power generation here. So that would be... I think I would go for just a pair of retractable 1x6s. And we would mount those guys there. Then we do landing legs. So just like quad LT2s. Those are kind of big. Quad LT1s. Like that. And then we retract that, and then there's this nonsense here, right? And this heat shield is going to do this, and is going to be massively overkill on the heat shield for re-entry. So that's all well and good. And then we have to deliver this. So we've got our deployable science. This is going to be like an engineer in here, I think. And if that's the case, then we're going to need a little bit more on here. So we'll put on a Z1K battery pack. I'm also going to put in a Prototyne Octo 2, which I think can fit up here. Perfect. Because if we don't have a pilot, we're going to need that. And then we should probably have some form of antenna on this, I should guess. So what we would end up looking for that, well, really we'd be looking for a relatively small one. We do have comsats in the station, or rather in the vicinity, as is. So we could just put a single retractable antenna back here, somewhere like that, that's intended to just go like that. Just so that we can have, you know, our Ketflix subscription. That would be perfect. So I think this is fine from here. The main question is, how is this joint? I mean, we can't... can we build struts like that? Oh, we can. I didn't think we could. So we just attach struts, something like this. In fact, we should be able to get away with just like 2 of them. So 1 here and 1 here. We're not going to be bringing any additional science equipment, are we? It could be a scientist that we send. We would not be bringing a lab, though, with this setup. That's potentially something that we might want to do, is bring a lab. If we did that, this would get dramatically more expensive. Out of curiosity, and I'm not calling this finalized at this moment, but out of curiosity, if we were to put in a TD-25 here, and then just attach this guy there, and we don't need dual TD-25s there, but we just attach this guy here like this. Obviously, this is massively overkill down here, right? There's no doubt about that. This is a very, very tiny payload compared to what we had before, and this is now 1.79 thrust weight. That's actually lower than I thought it would be. But we could probably get away with ditching these guys. That's 1.45. Actually, this is lower thrust to weight than I expected it to be. Interesting. Very interesting indeed, actually. Why is that thrust to weight so low? I expected this to be like 1.6 right here. I mean, 1.45 isn't awful. Don't get me wrong. But it is a little bit on the low side. Oh, that doesn't want to connect like that. I guess we'll connect them. Oh, it's because this is in hex symmetry. I want it to be in quad symmetry. So we would then connect this down to like here. But only 1 connected, or actually 2 connected. I wanted all 4 to connect there. Let's see if we can get it to connect like, yeah, see how they're floating out over here? That's exciting. Okay, weird. Oh, it's because of, yeah, it's because it's not lined up quite the right way. It's because this is 6. Sure. So, this would be fine for delivering us into orbit. I have no doubt about that. It should be okay. Now, the question is, do we want to have this be a less compact and a more thorough lander? We could just send a really, really basic engineer here, and we would need to hire a new one for that. And just say, you know what, we're not interested in the actual science. other than what we would get back from this. And to be honest, we probably have more science than we need once we get all of our Duna science back. So let's save that. Let's hop out here. We have currently like 800 science in the bank, and we're going to be getting a lot more. So we're going to get a lot from Duna. We're going to get a lot from Eve as well when we deploy this. And that all seems reasonably fine. Yeah, we've got 874 right now. In order to max all of this out, we would need... Let's see here. I'm going to call this... Let's see here. That would be 2,200. And then this would be 3,300. 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,300 is what we would need. We've got over 10% of that right now. Honestly, I think we'll get it. Should be fine. Let's just grab advanced motors for now. We can't grab anything else, but that'll do. Let's hop into the administration building. I just want this to be a actually, not the administration, this building here. I just want this to be a relatively basic setup here. This will be a level 0 Kerbal, so I don't think it actually matters which one we send here. I'm going to send an engineer. I want this to be a very basic mission. I'm thinking about dropping our number of initial side boosters to 4 here. Let's see what that would do to our thrust to weight. So we would grab this decoupler here, and then we would put this in, yeah, right about here. So it would end up being something like this, right? What would that be for thrust to weight? 1.36, a little on the low end for sure. That is definitely on the low end. Okay, let's back it off then, and we'll keep it at 6 for now. I mean, this is a lot of fuel that's being lifted up here, no doubt about that. But I think we can definitely ditch the SRBs since we don't have the Ike landing stage, and we've ditched some fuel here as well. And overall, this is just a way, way lighter craft. Now, this has no fuel and no engine to it, which means that we have to deliver ourselves into a terminal orbit with this. And then we're just kind of reliant on the atmosphere slowing us down. This is Eve we're talking about, so it has a crazy, crazy atmosphere. Should be fine. Right? Right. I'm pretty sure it's fine. That said, this heat shield here, I want to run a quick test here before we do anything else. Let's put in... It doesn't matter who's piloting this. Jeb is fine. We're just going to place this in a low orbit around Eve. Stage it a couple of times. I don't think... The main problem that I see right now is that we're going to have more drag on the heat shield than we're going to have on the actual craft. And we may downsize our heat shield here. But we're going to have more drag on the heat shield than the parachutes. And the heat shield is just going to get pinned to the craft. That's the concern that I have right now. Let's see if that is true. So let's put this out over Eve. So we're going to set orbit over Eve. Yep, minimum safe value is fine. And we'll just run a quick test here. So we're going to ditch these stages here. And get a little bit of distance here. There we go. And now we're going to head over to retrograde. Cool. And this is the form that we would be in, likely, at this point, or we would have ditched these tanks, one or the other. It doesn't really matter either way. We should definitely extend this antenna. We should extend these solar panels. Okay, cool. We have a connection. Looks good. Okay, so let's start a deceleration here, and we're checking to see our periapsis is now reasonable. So that's all we need. That's all we need there. So from here, we ditch these, we ditch this. Cool. And now, we warp. Down we go. I don't really care about going over into the dark side here. Although, if we were to run out of power, that's potentially a problem. We're going to retract these photovoltaic panels and our antenna. And now we have no data. So, can we actually turn here? Yes, we can. The SAS is just being turned off by Smart ASS. Yeah, we can do that just fine. So that's not a problem, even without data. And we inflate our heat shield, of course. We're flying high over Eve's peaks currently. And we can see... yeah. We're already slowing down. Not shocked about that. Let's accelerate forward. The real question that I have here... let's put our drogue chutes in there. The real question that I have is, how is this going to go when we want to detach this heat shield? I expect that we're going to have some problems with it. But we'll see. We can see our time to periapsis is going up. We're definitely not coming back up. And that's expected. So we're just going to physics warp through this as much as we can. And let's just see how the lander component of this works. I'm reasonably confident in the components all the way up until this stage. But it's mostly this detachment. Does this destroy our landing struts? Possibly. Does this just flip out and completely destroy our entire ship? That's also a possibility here. These heat shield detachments in the Eve atmosphere can be insane. How are we doing on electric charge? That shouldn't be a problem, in theory, especially if we're coming down dayside. That said, by this point, we're always going to have our photovoltaic panels retracted, just in case. And we definitely want to land on land, right? So that's going to be something too. We're lacking a KER on this. We should probably include one of those. Don't stop our time warp. Thanks. And we'll be on surface velocity minus. Cool. So we're warping on forward here. And we're coming around to the day side here quite soon. So that's looking fine. We're still quite high up. The real question is, how can we guarantee that we're going to be landing on land? And the answer to that is a definite, I have no idea. It's really, really hard to see where the land is on Eve. And it's hard to predict exactly where you're going to land when doing this sort of an aerobrake. We're currently over the Explodium Sea, so if we were to do this right now, like if this was a real landing, this would not be a good landing, right? And we can see we're massively slowing down here, and we're not really able to hold... we're holding surface velocity attitude pretty well, actually. Okay, so there's drogues, and there's main. So this was what I was concerned about right here. So we're in physics warp right now, but you can see this heat shield is currently causing more drag than our parachutes are. So we're just sitting on the heat shield, kind of surfing. So really what we need to do to avoid this, I think, is we need to not detach the heat shield until such a time as our parachutes are much, much closer to deploy. If we physics warp this, there's every chance right now that a Kraken just destroys this craft, which is fine. We're going to revert this either way. But this is the scenario that I was concerned about. What happens if we extend our legs right now? Surprisingly, that kind of works. Kinda. Our deployable science was destroyed while doing that. Okay, so let's revert this back. We have found a couple of issues. So let's take that back to vehicle assembly. Issue number 1. I want some space between this decoupler and the heat shield. So we're going to put in a modular girder segment there, perhaps even a second one. Like that. And then we will reattach these struts. Although that's supposed to be in dual symmetry. There we go. So we reattach those struts. Now I want to put a KER flight computer on here. Just to make sure that we've got one. Actually, I don't really like this model. I'm going to go with the computer flight unit. And that one on both sides. I don't think we need both. So that'll do for now. Cool. Beyond that, what else do we need? I did notice some wiggling here. So what if we were to do this as a single unit here? And we did this, then we did this, then we did this, and then we did... Not that. Get out of here. This. In theory, that works. We can also link this guy over here. So we can have each of these linked to 2 locations, right? So something like that, and then something like... Now, that one didn't go. Nor did that one. There. So something like that for strutting that together. So that'll be a lot more stable at the beginning. This could be put in a fairing. Which I would probably put the fairing here. So then we would put in a... We put in a 2.5 meter fairing. It's going to have to bow outwards a little bit, which I don't love. But a fairing would definitely be useful here. That is going to reduce our initial thrust to weight ever so slightly. But we would do a 2.5 meter fairing here. And then have it go out about like that. And then come up and then inward a bit like so. Okay. So that'll protect the equipment in there a little bit. Reasonably fine. What's our thrust to weight like? 1.45. It's not great, but it is technically enough. I'm not loving the positioning of these guys right now. I would prefer it if... We'll leave them on 6 symmetry. But I would prefer it if they were lined up about like this. We'll need to lower them. If I can get in there. That should do the trick. Maybe a little bit lower. There. About like that. Checking in on all of their fuel flows. That looks reasonable. Checking in on their strut work. That looks fine as well. I don't know about this being strutted in quite like that. I think that I would redo this strut and have it connect like here instead. Okay, so something along the lines of this. It's a little overkill still, no doubt about that. The reason I wanted to shift this, though, is I want just that tiny amount of extra thrust to weight. So instead of doing the 6 SRBs, we can do a little bit of cost cutting, and we can put in simply 2 SRBs. So we'll need to do it in single symmetry like this, and then duplicate it over to the other side. But then we would put in... Do we want Clydesdales? I mean, they're pretty expensive. Maybe we just run Polluxes here. Polluxes are a lot cheaper. We drop those on down like so, and we just have 2 of them. So they would be just assisting us at the beginning here. We would put in the hemispherical fuel tank. And then that, of course, would need to flow inward. Like so. And then we would strut that. Honestly, just a single strut down here is probably good enough. But I'll put a second one up here just to be safe. And then we would duplicate this guy and we would put it in over here. Like that. And then we would use the move tool to make sure that these guys are snapped in and symmetrical. Just like that. Perfect. So then these SRBs, of course, can be combined together like so. They don't have the thrust to weight, but they can be brought in here to move up our thrust to weight to 1.55 instead of 1.45. That's much, much better off the pad. I like it. I think we're ready to go here. This is not intended to be a particularly insane mission to Eve. It kind of is one because we're using the DNA of our insane mission to Duna. It kind of inherits that, but I think it's good. Let's launch this and let's put it into low Kerbin orbit here. And then next episode, we'll take it out to Eve and do the actual landing. Should be able to do that in a single episode, I think. That's the idea here anyway. So it definitely inherits a lot of the insane DNA of the Duna mission. There's no doubt about that. Absolutely, it inherits that. But it's also a lot simpler of a craft, with a lot lighter of a payload, and less fuel tanks. I don't like the wiggling that I saw here initially. Oh, these are not all connected up the way that they were previously. This didn't get reconnected. Right. That would do it. Okay. We'll revert that back, and I'll get those set up, and we'll do this launch next episode then. Okay. Well, I'll get those set up off camera. We already did it on camera. I don't need to do it again here. These just need to be redone. Not a big deal. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes. I think we had the wrong Kerbal, too. In the form of likes, comments, and bell ringings. I've completely messed up the cadence of my outro. Let me try this again. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, James, Shadow Wolf, and Lohan80, Ro Corvid, Kentogan, Andy McGar, Spartan News, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Soccerman12 UK, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.